Hello, fourth graders. Mrs. Clausen here to continue social studies lessons with you guys. Last time you listened to Mrs. G read to you the book, The Branches of the U.S. Government. So today I'm going to be continuing her read aloud. And today I'm actually going to go into more of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. I know she focused on the branches of government, and she also had focused on the Articles of Confederation. So I'm going to continue talking about how we went from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution and how that change was made. So I'm excited to read to you today, and I'll be just like we're in the classroom together and you're listening to me read. So super excited about that. So she left off talking about John Adams with you guys, so I'm just going to pick up from where she left off. So this next section is called From the Articles to the Constitution. The American states won their independence from Great Britain in 1783, but some people believe that the Articles of Confederation had not created the best government for the new nation. In 1787, Adams wrote, "The people's rights and liberties can never be preserved without separating the executive power from the legislative. This was because the legislators' elected members best reflected what the people from a particular state wanted." And here I wanted to show you, this is a picture in the book, and it's a picture of the founding fathers. And they also thought about how the new nation's government should be organized. Congress soon called for the convention to meet in Philadelphia to discuss changing the Articles of Confederation. And the reason is that they wanted to change it because in the quote I just read to you of John Adams, they wanted to have more of a national government. So the states had a lot of power at the time, and they wanted there to be separation of powers and checks and balances, like how you learned last time in the read aloud. So the delegates created the Constitution instead. So that was a completely new document. They scratched out the Articles of Confederation, and they wanted to create a completely new thing, and that's the Constitution. James Madison wrote a detailed plan for the Constitution. He proposed government would also have a legislature with two houses. One would be a lower house directly elected by the people. The other would be an upper house chosen by the members of the lower house. It was decided that the legislature would be called Congress, which we knew that the legislative branch is known as Congress. The delegates also created a single executive called the President. The President would be commander-in-chief or head of the military. The Constitution also called for a federal judiciary, one with the Supreme Court, which we know, and any lower courts that the Congress created. So this is kind of where we're learning a little bit more about how the executive branch or the president came to be, because at the time it was the states that were trying to make all the decisions, and there was no one in charge controlling anything. So I'm going to read to you a little bit about the Constitutional Convention for you to get more of an idea of what these conversations looked like when they were discussing moving towards the Constitution. So the Constitutional Convention took place in Philadelphia from May 25th to September 17th, 1787. Every state except Rhode Island sent delegates. George Washington was chosen to lead the convention. 55 delegates attended. Not all of them were in Philadelphia the entire time. 39 delegates signed the Constitution. Some had left the city before the convention ended. Some did not sign because they did not like the new government the Constitution created. One of the most discussed issues at the convention was the inclusion of an executive branch, which I just talked about. The branch was absent from the Articles of Confederation. So can you guys believe that? In the Articles of Confederation, they didn't even take into account having an executive branch, and that's because of the Constitution. And so the executive branch is basically giving the national government power, just how state governments had some power. So for example, the national government, like the president, can veto any state laws that they don't agree with. And they can also take authority over anything that the states couldn't handle. So it once again gives balance of powers. There's not too much power in one state, and that there's not too much power in the national government. It's a way to balance the powers. So that's super interesting that that's what the Constitutional Convention created. Something to think about is how things would be different today if the Constitutional Convention didn't happen. Something to really think about. Like, how would our lives change today if that didn't occur? And it's interesting to read about the history of it, of that not everyone was in agreement of it at the time. There are lots of differences of opinions from different state leaders and from the founding fathers, but luckily they all came together and made a compromise so that the states and the national government could have a balance of powers, which is exciting. So I'm going to read on. The Constitution was sent to the states to be ratified in September 1787. In 1791, a series of amendments to the Constitution, called the Bill of Rights, served to further check government power. The amendments spelled out basic rights that the federal government could not take away. What does amendment mean? So amendment means change. So these are changes that are being made to the Constitution, which is kind of interesting because they switched over to the Constitution from the Articles of Confederation, and now they still want to make some changes to the Constitution. And so the first 10 amendments were a part of the Bill of Rights, and then they continued to add some more amendments or more changes to the Constitution. So, for example, one of the Bill of Rights amendments, like one of the 10 amendments, is freedom of speech. Another one is the right to have a jury trial. Another one is freedom of press. So think about it. Freedom of speech is really important. Imagine how your lives would be different without freedom of speech. Another thing is, after the Bill of Rights, like I mentioned, there were some more amendments that were added. So for example, the 13th Amendment outlawed slavery, and that was one of the things we learned about was slavery. And I'm sure a lot of you read historical fiction books on that topic. And that's another thing that, can you imagine if these amendments didn't exist, how our lives would be different? And then the 15th and 19th Amendments give African Americans and women the right to vote. So imagine that. If those amendments didn't happen, I wouldn't be able to vote. And, you know, just it's an interesting thing to think about, because once you get to be a voting age, you're so excited to make a difference and fight for what you believe in. And just imagine if you didn't have that right. And so it's really interesting to learn about the different amendments and how they came together, how the Constitution came together to try to give everyone rights that they have today. So I hope you enjoyed listening to the read aloud today. I have put a lot of links in the Google Doc for some brain pops that I found that really go into way more detail about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and I would love for you to watch those, just like we would together in the classroom, and really think, I think a big question to focus on when you are watching those videos and even listening to me is, how would our lives be different today if none of this happened? That's something I always like to think about when learning about history. So enjoy and good luck, and hope you liked listening. Miss you guys.